I'm going to show you how to do your centered zipper sample. The instructions I'm showing you are what you'll need to do just for your sample, but the techniques you're doing for this also apply to full-scale garments. So the first thing we want to do is make sure you have all of your supplies. You'll need a zipper, 2 pieces of muslin, I promise there's 2 there, something to mark your seam allowance with, a ruler to measure your seam allowance, as well as some pins. So the first thing we want to do is we want to measure our seam allowance. We want to use a 5/8 seam allowance. So I'm going to measure that right here and draw a line all the way from top to bottom for that seam allowance. There we go. Okay. So this is our seam allowance. We will stitch this together, but we're not quite ready for that step because what we want to do now is we're going to lay our zipper out on our fabric with the top of the zipper matching the top edge of our muslin. And we need to measure across where the stop of our zipper is. So I'm just going to kind of eyeball over here. We need to make sure that we do our mark just below. So if I was actually marking on the zipper, it would be right here. So I'm going to transfer that over to here. You don't want it to be above because of how the zipper goes in, and you'll see why in just a moment. So I've marked here. I'm also going to put a T here at the top to help remind me that this is the top, and a B here at the bottom to remind me that this is the bottom. So top of the zipper, bottom of the zipper. Okay, so we have our seam allowance marked, and then we have this stopping line. What we want to do now is we need to stitch down our seam allowance, but we're going to use 2 different stitch lengths. From the mark to the top, we want to do a basting stitch, or a seam stitch length of 5. From the mark down, we want to do a regular stitch length, which is a stitch length of approximately 3. So from here to here, we're doing 3 stitch length, and from here to here, we're going to do a 5 stitch length because this is a basting seam, just from here to here. Now, it is also important to know when we go to stitch this together that we want to back stitch right here, but right after the stop. Now, when you're sewing a zipper, you always want to go the same direction. For our centered zipper, we're going to sew from the bottom to the top every time. And we're going to do that even here with this seam. So let's go sew. Okay, so now we are ready to sew. And remember, we always want to sew from the bottom to the top. So I'm going to start this direction. I'm going to stitch right on top of the line, just like we always do. At the bottom, I'm going to back stitch because we always start with a back stitch. I'm going to stitch up to my mark. I did put a pin there, but you can see my mark right there. Now when I get to my mark, I'm going to stop and back stitch and then change my seam allowance to a large basting stitch. Then I'm going to continue down the line. Now here at the top, you can back stitch. You don't have to. I'm going to choose not to, just for the purpose of this sample. So we're done. And there we go. Got a little snag right here. Just going to straighten that out. So from here to here, there's a back stitch here, size 3 stitch length, back stitch, and then from this mark all the way to the top is a 5 stitch length basting stitch. Okay, now let's head over to the iron. All right, now all we're going to do is open this up, and we are going to press our seam allowance open, just like this. Now we are ready to begin the process of actually installing our zipper. So our seam is pressed open, got our top and our bottom. So now we want to take our zipper. Now this side is the right side of the zipper because you can easily grab the zipper pull. But what we want to do for this application is this is the right side of the garment. So it needs to go in like this because we will rip open part of this seam in just a few minutes. So make sure when you are doing this step that you double check that your zipper is right side down on your seam. You can't get at the zipper pull to successfully pull it down, then it is placed correctly. So something else that helps too is to have the zipper pull pointed up. That gets it a little bit more out of your way. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to line up the top edge. I'm going to kind of flip this up so I can watch my zipper teeth and make sure that as I'm laying it out, I am lining it up with my seam. So I'm just going to very slowly roll this down and make sure that this is fully where I need it to be. Right there. Okay, I'm going to hold this in place. And now we want to pin through the zipper. Now one thing that I forgot. Now we are ready to begin the process of putting in our zipper. So what you're seeing right now is the wrong side of the sample or garment. This would be the right side. Your zipper also has a right side. You can easily grab the zipper pull and open the zipper. And it also has a wrong side. I can't hold the zipper pull to open the zipper from this angle. When it's fully constructed, the zipper sits like this inside the garment. So as we go to lay our zipper down to begin stitching it, we need to double and triple check that we've laid our zipper out correctly. So the correct way to do this is I'm going to flip this pull up just so that it gets it a little less bulk in this area. And I'm going to put the right side down on top of this seam. Now before I do that, something that I find useful, especially for this first step, is that we're going to, with our zipper, we're going to baste to the seam allowance on either side of the zipper. So when I'm ready to place, I'm going to actually grab my seam allowance on one side, flip this fabric under. So as I pin this side, I only have the seam allowance on this side to worry with. I'm going to turn this out so that I can see my seam right here, line up at the top, and I'm going to flip my zipper over so that I can watch the zipper teeth and make sure that I am, as I lay it down, placing this zipper right where it needs to go. And you can even place a little and then put a pin in. I'm going to go through all the layers just like that. Okay, I'm going to check again, roll it down a little bit more, and place another pin through all the layers. Just like that. Okay, keep going until I have the whole length of the zipper pinned. Right there is my zipper stop. So I'm going to pin through here. I put my pin just above the zipper stop, which is that metal piece going across the teeth. I'm going to real quick kind of peek under here and make sure that my stop is where that line was. And it is. So now we're going to take this to the sewing machine. Straighten this up a bit here at the top and put another pin right up here. All right, now I've pinned through that side. Let's take it to the sewing machine. Now before I begin sewing my zipper, I need to change out the presser foot on my sewing machine because this foot right here is going to have an extremely difficult time getting close to the zipper teeth without getting caught. So here's how we change out our zipper foot. On the back of the sewing machine, there is a little lever right there. I'm going to push that lever, and the foot falls right off. Okay, I'm going to set this aside, but make sure that I don't lose it. Actually, I'm going to set it inside our accessory box so I don't lose it. Now I want to use my zipper foot. This is a zipper foot. It's very narrow, which is great for getting up and close to zipper teeth without getting caught. Now, this particular zipper foot can be attached on either the left side or the right side, and that will dictate where the needle falls. It will either fall on the left side or the right side. Some zipper feet don't really have this option, and you have to change the position of the needle. But for our shop machines, we actually just switch which side the zipper is on. So I'm going to install the zipper foot to the left side. So I'm going to line it up. There's a bar underneath. I'm going to line it up underneath the presser foot lever. Slowly lower the lever until it catches the presser foot. There it is. It's fully attached. Now we're ready to begin sewing. Nope, I was incorrect. I need to do it on the opposite side. On the right side. There we go. Because we want to sew from the bottom to the top, always. With the zipper foot on the right side, that allows the zipper foot to get very close to the teeth, and we're just going to run the teeth right up against the edge of the presser foot right here. Remember, we're only sewing through just the seam allowance on one side for this step. As you go, you will want to remove your pins because the zipper foot does not like the pins. Since this is a basting stitch, you can backstitch. You don't have to. I'm going to. And I'm still on a basting stitch length. Pull out my pins as I go. Now, as you get closer to the zipper head, the zipper pull, it gets a little bulky. So I'm going to pull that last pin out and hold the pieces together. And I'm going to kind of steer off to the side a little bit so that my zipper pull doesn't get caught right here on the zipper foot. If it does get caught, that's okay. You can put your needle down and lift your presser foot to kind of wiggle it out of your way. I'm going to go into back stitch. And we are basted on one side. Just like that. Okay. Now we need to repeat the same process, but with the other side. So we're going to real quick repin our zipper because we want to check and make sure that the teeth are still lining up on that center seam, and they should. If they are not, then you will need to rip this seam out and repin. So I'm going to put my pins back in just to hold this in place. I like to pin horizontally because it makes it a little easier for me to remove my pins as I go. And as I'm pinning, I'm double checking to make sure that the teeth are where I need them to be by feeling for the teeth through the seam. Kind of guide this over so that it can get caught on the seam allowance and pin that down. All right, so now I'm just going to sew through the seam allowance on this side. Again, going from the bottom to the top. Now to do that, I need to switch my presser foot because if I were to go under like this, my stitchings wouldn't actually catch the zipper sides as well because the needle's on the far right. So I'm just going to pop this off, scoot it over, and reattach it on the left. And repeat. Do the same thing. I'm going to run this time the left edge of the presser foot against the zipper teeth. But not too far. You don't want to go on top of. Just let it be a guide for you. Again, pull out your pins as you go. again, I went a little off to the side here just so that my zipper pull doesn't get caught. All right, so now it is basted to just the seam allowance. We're going to take this back to the table and do some additional marking on the right side of the garment before it is fully installed. Now that we have our zipper basted to only the seam allowance, we need to flip this to the right side of the garment. I'm going to, with my finger, do another check to make sure that the zipper teeth are on top of the seam. They are, they're perfectly lined up. And now I'm also going to feel for the zipper stop. That was that metal bar that went across. So it's right here, and I'm going to take a mark about, we're going to do 1/4 of an inch down from where I can feel the bottom of that mark is. I draw a little line right across here. Now the next step that we need to do is we are going to top stitch this zipper down, but we want it to be nice and straight and even. So we're going to measure from the seam line over 1/4 of an inch and draw a line from the top to the bottom. I am using my Frixion pen for this step so that I can then iron it later and this marking disappears. So we're going to start here at this line that we drew, which marks the bottom of our zipper stop, and measure across 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And I'm just going to go down, measuring from the seam, make a mark at 1/4 of an inch. Do a couple of tick marks all the way down, and then I will connect these with my ruler. Okay. Same thing on the other side. You could use your longer ruler to make all of these marks. I am choosing not to because the zipper teeth have a way of kind of making this go wonky when you're measuring over the teeth. So I'm going to use my ruler now to match up those lines. But notice I don't have my ruler on top of the center of the zipper with the teeth. So this is nice and straight because it's not actually up against the zipper teeth, the raised part. So I'm going to draw a line all the way down. Whoop. Grab my sample. I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side. Make sure this is nice and straight. Before I make my mark, measure twice, mark once. Okay, so right there. For the sake of making sure that none of this moves, I am going to pin my zipper in place. I'm going to actually pin this direction. This keeps the seam allowance from moving when I go to top stitch it. You can hand baste or you can pin. I prefer pinning because it's a little faster. And personally, with my own hand sewing skills, I am more concerned about the seam allowance shifting while I'm hand sewing the basting line. If you're doing a hand sewing basting line, you would do it just right on top of this drawn line. Then you would go back and do it with the machine. Move that one up a little bit. And as I'm doing this, I'm always going back and reflattening, re-straightening, making sure that everything is staying in its proper place. Okay, now we're ready to take this back to the sewing machine. All right, so we're back at our sewing machine. We have our pinned and drawn top stitching line. Again, we are always doing from the bottom to the top. If you're not sure which way that is, flip your sample over, find your B and your T. The top is where the zipper pull ends when the zipper is closed. So I'm going to flip this back over, and we want to start from the bottom. Start this direction. My zipper foot is on the left, so I'm going to stitch across the bottom. I will do a back stitch, turn, and then go up following this line. Okay, so let's do that together. Press our foot down, and I'm actually starting just a little bit past the seam line. It's hard to tell with the light from the sewing machine, but I'm actually starting on this side of the seam line and doing a back stitch there. I will do the same thing on the opposite side. That adds extra stability across the bottom. And we want to make sure that we are at a regular stitch length, so a 3, not a basting stitch. The other stitches we did with the zipper so far were a basting stitch. Remember to change. Okay. I'm going to leave my needle down and pivot right on top of, and I've actually got a needle here in the way, so I'm going to pull that out. Again, always pull your needles out. By needles, I mean pins. So I've got something interesting happening here. Whenever I pulled my extra thread off to the side, it got kind of wrapped around the presser foot here, and that's fine. I'm just going to grab my little snippy scissors and trim just that thread, not the one coming from the needle. I'm just going to release this one here. Actually back there. There. Now it's going to stop shrinking up on me. Okay, we can keep going right on top of that seam. Come on. I want to make sure that I'm holding this top nice and steady as I come around past the zipper pull. I'm going to actually put my needle down, straighten out just a tiny bit because the zipper pull got caught on the zipper foot. And back stitch. Okay, so there's one side done. One side is stitched. Now I'm going to switch my presser foot to the opposite side and do the other side. Again, we're starting at the bottom and working our way up. I'm starting on this side of the seam over here, back stitching here and going over. Right on top of the line I drew. And before I do that, I'm going to get this thread. Instead of on the left side, I need it over here on the right so it doesn't get caught on my zipper foot again. Okay. Start with a back stitch, go to the corner, pull up my pin, turn, and continue sewing. Right on that line I drew. Back stitch, pull off, and now our zipper is fully installed. Except there's one problem. We can't get to our zipper. So let's head back to the table with our seam ripper. Okay, so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to trim away these extra threads from stitching, just because I don't like the long threads that are left. Also, with a zipper, you do want to cut away any excess longer threads because you don't want them getting caught in the zipper teeth. Anything that's long enough to reach the zipper teeth might get caught in the zipper teeth. There. Okay, so now I've got all of that trimmed away, but now I need to get at my zipper. So I'm going to take my seam ripper, and I'm going to start at the bottom, I'm just going to slide it between the stitches. This is why we did a basting stitch here, so that we can easily take this part of the seam out. Just going to run my seam ripper right down this seam, being very careful to make sure that I'm only catching the stitches of the seam. Getting closer to the end and hitting the zipper teeth. And go back towards the bottom. Just make sure I catch that last stitch or two. Okay, and now we can easily get to our zipper. Look, we have a functioning zipper. Now, you will notice when you do that, you will have all of these little tiny threads sticking out of that seam. So we want to go ahead and pull those out and get all that trimmed away, because again, any thread that's close enough to reach the zipper teeth might get stuck in them. So let's just trim all of that away. You can just kind of pick it away with your fingers. If it doesn't want to go anywhere, then you can grab a pair of tweezers and get all that pulled out. And that's it, you're done. You have now created a centered zipper. Check and make sure that it opens and closes, and you're done.